Go for it.
Well, back to this wealth dimension.
Yes.
Well, in some ethnic conflicts, we can have a sort of war of attrition type of situations in which initial power, initial wealth would matter a lot. And so I'm just wondering whether instead of taking into account income, what would be the results if we had the chance to look at the accumulated income? Because basically, I mean, if you are going to spend money over conflict, well, basically you will be using your resources rather than your current income. So how can we sort of incorporate the wealth dimension into your general framework?
Right. So actually, you're bringing out the most important point in all of this, which is that wealth or economic attributes in general have two aspects. One is that they affect your ability to participate, and the other is that they make you a target for other people to see. And now the question is the ability to participate in conflict. How does that depend on your economic? If I understand the question. And in fact, in this paper in the AER, Esteban and I have actually tried to argue that that one of the reasons for which, say, ethnic conflict is so salient is that within a particular ethnic group, let's say like the Hindus, you have very rich people and very poor people. Yeah? And this inequality actually creates a further synergy in participating in conflict, because the poor can supply the labor and the rich can supply the money. Right? So in some sense, the average wealth in an ethnic group is not a very good indicator of the ability to supply resources. Because if you take the average wealth and you make it highly unequal, then that actually increases the ability of people to supply resources. You know, the top guys can supply the money and the bottom guys can supply the labor. So that's one aspect of wealth. The other aspect of wealth is to make you an attractive target. So if you are a Muslim in India, you build a new house, people might want to attack. I mean, it might happen that people might want to seize it. Now, that's typically not the way I feel. I don't know enough about it, but that's typically not the way in which a conflictual situation builds up. A conflictual situation builds up, for example, when you see a particular ethnic group entering into a particular sector, for example, the textile sector of the country, Ahmedabad in Gujarat, has Muslim businessmen have been coming more and more into the sector, or a particular occupational category of employment, and you see more people from another ethnic group. And it is at this time when people of the opposing ethnic majority or minority try to form a coalition in order to drive this particular. And that kind of entering into sectors is more correlated with income rather than wealth. So that's why I think for the second part of the question, income may be more relevant. Yeah.
A follow-up question. Can one form of conflict affect another form of conflict? So say there is some economic conflict between the high and low income of the same ethnic group.
Right.
So existence of this kind of conflict might reduce the amount of ethnic conflict between
That's right.
Muslims and.
That's right.
Did you guys?
So the reason I'm saying that's right in such an enthusiastic fashion, because it's exactly the kind of question that we deal with in the AER paper. So what we do is, we ask is that, so here's a society, it can be cut along different lines, right? Economic, ethnic, maybe geographical, right? Religious, caste, and so forth, right? And the question is whether one kind of conflict, or the existence of the possibility of one kind of conflict, whether that tends to increase the possibility of another kind of conflict, or does it tend to reduce it? Okay? Now you can think of situations where an open conflict along one dimension, let's say class, will reduce conflict along another dimension. But a latent conflict along one dimension, by latent I mean it's potentially conflictual, let's say across class, it might increase the conflict along another dimension. The reason being that, let's say, rich individuals, okay, might want to form an ethnic coalition in order to avoid the possibility of a class conflict and point the conflict along ethnic lines. So they might try to buy off poor people in their ethnic group, reduce the possibility of class conflict, and then have conflict sideways across ethnic groups in order to reduce the thing that they really are worried about. And this is what we're talking about. So you can go both ways. Yeah.
One question. We have this polarization measure, and maybe we can know whether this debate. Would I use it for income distributions as well?
Yes.
And then look at this impact on growth?
Yes, except that typically income distributions are typically unimoral, right? So most income distributions are unimoral. The only income distribution that I know of, the famous one, which is not unimoral, is, well, that's true. United States I don't think of as that important, but the one that is really important is the world income distribution. The world distribution of income is strongly bimoral. Okay? The United States is also bimoral. Okay? This is not to say that polarization only works when there is bimodality. It works for all distributions, right? And you can use it, but there is a lot more agreement between polarization measures and inequality measures with income distributions than with these other sorts of distributions. For example, distribution of goods. But in principle, you can use it.
I mean, no, I was thinking polarization might not be necessarily something that is bad. The particular example I had in mind was sport science. If the population is quite polarized, maybe it's much better for the competition.
Absolutely, absolutely. Except that when the competition is over economic resources, then that's conflict. Yeah. But otherwise, it may be very healthy. Yeah.
Because of your ethics studies, do you argue that a lower or weaker cross-cutting cleavages or a stronger cross-cutting cleavages is the most important determinant for conflicts? Of why there are studies, of why there are conflicts? Is that the most important research?
So let me see if I can answer it.
You said about the cross-cutting cleavage.
I understand, right.
The stronger it is, the more chance there will be war, for example. Is there a relationship between them?
The relationship is complex. If you have lots of cross-cutting cleavages, okay, that might actually reduce the possibility of conflict. So for example, in a polarization index, if you have lots of different cleavages, then the polarization index will typically be low. Okay? But the potential for conflict, so I guess the way I think about it is that groups and societies are trying to get economic resources. Okay, this is my philosophy. Okay? They're trying to get economic resources. The economic resources can be obtained directly through a class conflict. Okay? Of course, they can be obtained directly through growth. Okay? But if conflict, either through a class conflict or through other kinds of markers, artificial markers, like Hindu and Muslim. Now, the class conflict is an extremely expensive form of conflict, going back to this question, because the poor people, if you look at the poor on one side, they don't have the resources to actually spend on conflict, going back to this issue of wealth, right? So class conflicts are the most natural conflicts, but they're also the most difficult conflicts. Okay? The rich have no incentive to directly attack the poor, and the poor have all the incentives to attack the rich, but they don't have the resources to attack the rich. So the typical conflicts that therefore take place are distorted conflicts, which use other markers and preserve inequality within each group, which makes it easier to carry on. That's the overall view that I have. From that, we can try to deduce particular results. Yes?
I was looking at your first conclusion there, the one that just disappeared. The model predicts fractionalization and polarization for different kinds of bidding on the public goods produced. Yet you said that empirically there was no evidence that polarization was connected to anything. So does that mean that...
That fractionalization was connected.
Yeah, so the fractionalization, does that mean that if the model is right, that all conflicts are
Very good.
public goods?
Excellent. That's an excellent question. And the answer is, I don't know, because a lot of the stuff that I told you about has not even been developed chronologically, okay? In other words, the result that I told you about public goods versus private goods is a result that we've been working on very recently in the last 6 months. The empirical test that I talked about on polarization was done 4 years ago. Okay? So I'm not sure that the empirical tests have been set up correctly, just in a structural way for understanding that question. But if I had to base an answer on what I know at this point, I would say that most conflicts are either over economic public goods or they are over ideologies. If I had to go out on a limb, into it, that's about it. Yeah. All the model's wrong.
Can I ask another question? You showed a map of India with different amounts of violence in there.
Yeah.
Can you draw any conclusions from the amount of violence and your model, or where it comes from? Like I was thinking, in fact, that Muslims tend to live more in Gujarat and also Maharashtra.
No, West Bengal and Kerala have a very high percentage of Muslims. When I say high, when I say high, by the way, I mean about a quarter. Okay? About the same fraction as Gujarat. But Steve Wilkinson's beautiful quote suggests that political systems at the state level have something to do with it. The little study that I've talked about here suggests that income changes have something to do with it. In Gujarat, Muslim incomes have gone up quite a bit. And we are arguing that it's this change in Muslim income that has provoked a resentment among the Hindu population, and that there have been reactions.
Some people would also count proximity to Pakistan as a factor.
Proximity, but West Bengal is next to Pakistan until 1973, right? Bangladesh now, right?
Yes.
But I don't know. That's
Bangladesh really lacks resources. So
that's true. Yeah, but before 1973 it was North Pakistan.
right. But if you think that Pakistan is perhaps supplying some of the resources, that might make sense.
Though, what about, Bihar or Uttar Pradesh, Andhra Pradesh? These guys are not. I don't want to blame Pakistan for our problem. Good. Thank you again, and sorry for